Hi guys and welcome back. So, having been here for a few months, today we're going to tell you 5 things we wish we'd known before moving to Canada.
The first one is that we've found the culture incredibly easy to fit into here. We've lived together in France, Austria and Malta and loved all of them, but we never really felt like we belonged in those countries. There is of course a language issue. The two of us have the same first language as everyone in Western Canada and we didn't in the other countries, but even allowing for that, we found it very easy to integrate here. We spent a lot of time dwelling on whether the culture would suit us, and it really has. We'd have saved ourselves a lot of stress had we known that in advance.
Canada is a country of immigrants, and most Canadians, except Indigenous people, need only go back a maximum of 3 or 4 generations in their family to find someone who immigrated here. The fact that everyone we meet either chose to move here like us, or is the descendant of an immigrant means that there isn't really a strong cultural identity and newcomers don't have to conform to historical traditions or established social norms. We found that when we lived in different European countries, each one had quite established ways of life, and you either fit in or felt slightly like an outsider. Everyone here in Canada has their own way of socialising, recreating and living, and it feels like a very free place to live. You come here, you live how you want, and you find people who you fit in with. As a friend of ours said, the great thing about Canada is that you can make it yours, and we can't put it any better than that.
The second surprise is the tipping and tax issue. Things are done slightly differently in each province, but here in BC, tax is added to the price of your purchase when you go to pay, so the price you see in the shop isn't what you end up paying. To add to the confusion, the tax you pay varies on what you're buying, so alcoholic drinks have a higher percentage tax on them than food, for example. As a result, buying a meal in a restaurant involves doing some rough maths on what you're actually going to pay for your meal and glass of wine, and we found that surprisingly annoying. We knew it would be the case, but it's actually quite irritating to constantly be paying slightly more for everything than what you read on the price list. Tipping is also an issue, and here about 15% is the standard tip. It's effectively part of service staff's salaries, but it still feels like a bit of a hidden cost. When you combine tax and tip, you're basically paying about 30% more than the advertised price on a restaurant menu. We're steadily getting used to it, but it is still a little bit annoying.
The third issue we've run into is that domestic travel in Canada is expensive. Before we came, we'd heard that air travel within Canada was pricey, but we figured that if we were flexible, travelled outside of peak dates and times, we'd be able to find some deals. Wrong. Flights here are expensive at all times and dates. There are low seasons when things are slightly more reasonable, but compared to the abundant low-cost flights we got used to in Europe, air travel feels like a real luxury here. Canadians think nothing of driving 12 hours to go on vacation or visit family, and having seen the prices of flights, we can see why.
Ironically, it can be relatively inexpensive to fly to Europe from Canada. Last week, some friends of ours booked flights, including an internal Canadian flight to Europe, and they were cheaper than almost any domestic flights we've seen. You're not actually allowed, due to airline regulations, to book a multi-leg flight and get off halfway, but if you could, it might well be cheaper to book a flight to London via your desired destination and just skip out the leg to London. Basically, if you move to Canada, count on seeing the country by road, not air, unless you've got plenty of cash.
Our fourth issue is also travel related, and it's Canada's lack of public transport. The biggest cities in Canada have decent transit systems, but anywhere outside of those urban centres there is very, very limited public transport. We live in Kelowna, the 3rd biggest city in BC, and here the bus network is tiny. Before we moved here, we looked at the bus network and figured that we'd use it as much as possible. But in reality, the buses are so infrequent and the lines quite limited that we've been barely able to get any use out of public transport, and we've been forced to drive instead. We also try to use our bikes where possible, but regardless, you need to count on moving yourself around in Canada. Public transport isn't going to be much use unless you're in a major city or end up being close to a bus line.
The final thing we didn't anticipate is something that sounds incredibly minor, but it causes an amazing amount of unnecessary confusion, and it's the way that the date is written in Canada. In the UK, the date is written, for example, 15/8/2022, in other words, the 15th day of the 8th month in 2022. The US does things differently and would write the same date as 8/15/22, the 8th month and the 15th day of 22. Either one works, provided you stick resolutely to it, but in Canada they interchange the two ways of writing the date. Sometimes the day comes first, sometimes the month comes first. and it hasn't seemingly been decided which one the country is going to use. It sounds ridiculous, but Canada just needs to make a decision.
So there you have it. 5 things we either didn't know or had underestimated before moving here. Overall, Canada has more than met our expectations, but there are definitely a few surprises. What have you enjoyed and struggled with in Canada? Let us know in the comments section, then hit subscribe on your way out. See you next time.